everyone. This is Katie at Spence-Chapin. We're going to get started in just a minute. I'm going to give a couple more minutes for people to filter in. I'm hoping in the meantime, if you can, on your GoToWebinar pop-up, just in the chat section, just type in to let me know that you can hear me and audio is working okay. I'd appreciate it, just so I can be sure before we get started. Thanks so much, and we'll just give it another maybe 2 minutes or so. Thanks, guys. Okay, for those of you filtering in, if again you could just confirm on the chat section of your GoToWebinar pop-up that you can hear me, just so I know and can be sure the audio is working okay. We're going to get started in just a minute or two. Thank you. Okay, everyone, welcome to the Talking with Kids About Adoption webinar. I'm going to get started. I'm sure there will still be some people filtering in, but I do just want to make sure we are careful of everyone's time and get going. We have a lot to cover tonight, and I'm going to have plenty of time for questions. So again, I had put in the chat section just double check to see if everyone can hear me. I haven't gotten an answer yet, so I'm going to assume and hope that's a yes. But if there are ever any difficulties with audio, or if anything just isn't working for you, please just write into that chat box to let me know. Okay, so I am going to get started with everything. So again, welcome to our webinar. My name, as you'll see on your screen, is Katie Rogala. I'm the Manager of Community Programming at Spence-Chapin. And so as you know, tonight we're going to be discussing how to speak with kids about adoption at each stage of development. And I'm going to do my best to keep this presentation to a half hour. I'd like to wrap up the presentation piece around 6:30, so we'll have plenty of time for questions before we end at 7 o'clock. And again, that being said, if I'm going too fast or need me to clarify anything, you can also feel free to put that in the chat section, and I'm happy to help. Okay, so I'm going to get us started. Our first slide, which is a review of why we should be talking about adoption with our kids. And I'm not going to read through every bullet here, and I assume most of you in the audience, know a lot of this already, but it certainly bears repeating, and there's a few points in here that I'd like to pull out and talk about. So talking about adoption strengthens family bonds, which I know might sound counterintuitive to some people, but it is important to acknowledge that adoption is a shared experience within the family, and talking about it does create mutual understanding and trust for everyone. We know that adoption is a really complex topic, and talking about it is really important. Kids need their parents to help them understand it. It also helps parents to talk about adoption. Um, it's tough for us too to talk about adoption and to manage the complexities. So the more we can talk about it, the more our comfort level increases. And this is going to be especially important as your children get older and the conversations become more frequent and more complicated. So it's important to remember also that adoption should really always be talked about, not told in a big dramatic moment. It should always be a part of the conversation. We know that silence on adoption can easily be interpreted by your child as shame or embarrassment when that's not our goal. Our goal is to create an open dialogue. So that being said, we know why it's important to talk about adoption, but let's be honest, it's really hard. And there's a lot of barriers, a lot of things that can get in the way of having those conversations. So here we've listed some possible thoughts and feelings that parents might experience around these conversations. And these are all totally valid. And trust me, you're definitely not alone if these reflect how you're feeling. Many parents want to protect their child from the disturbing facts of their adoption and struggle with how they're going to share that information. And other parents have limited information and aren't sure what to do when their children asks for more. One fear I hear a lot from parents is that talking about adoption might make your child feel more different and maybe not as much a part of the family and will have the opposite effect that you're intending. And we understand those fears and definitely understand that all of these things would make parents feel uncomfortable and hesitant, nervous, sad, or even angry. So the good news is that we're going to be talking about how to overcome some of these barriers. With our time constraints tonight, it'll be kind of a basic overview, but I hope it's a conversation that we can continue going here at Spence and offer a lot of support around. So with this, let's start with finding resolution. So really what this means is doing your own internal work as a parent to identify what are your triggers and challenges when it comes to talking about adoption. What are the things you wish you could avoid, and what are the things that bring up a lot for you emotionally? Those things are okay, but you need to be aware of them as well so you can get the support you need to manage them so you can effectively have conversations with your children. So you might want to look to your support network for help with that. It could be more formal supports like counseling or parent coaching, but it could also be joining a community group, like an adoptive family play group, a support group. It could be as simple as reading books. And there's certainly a lot of those resources here at Spence. So as an example, we do have a monthly adoptive family play group, and it's for parents with adopted children ages 0 through 6, and that's called Bagels and Blocks, and a quarterly offshoot of that for older kids ages 6 through 8 called Play Cafe. It's just one of the many services we offer that provide that support network to families and are an opportunity to connect with other families as well as other adoption professionals to talk about some of these difficult things and get some support. So as you prepare for these conversations, it's important to take a stance of learning and listening. Your goals are going to be to keep communication open, to be positive yet honest, learn from your mistakes, and this is really key and can be a hard thing to do, but listen for the feelings behind your child's questions. So a tool I want to share with you, which you'll see at the last bullet point here, is the 10 truths of telling. And again, for the sake of time tonight, I won't be able to go through each one of these, but this is a really great tool and a nice guideline for parents. I certainly encourage you to take a look on your own time. As I did with our previous slide, I'm going to pull out a few that I think are particularly important. So the first one I want to highlight is always tell the truth, which is number 3. And to be clear, this is not the same as telling your child everything all at once. It's important to be honest. You don't want to be untruthful about your child's adoption story, but at the same time, you want to remember they can only take in what they can understand. So there is a way to share information without maybe divulging everything at once if it's something you're not sure that your child is ready for just yet. So a way you might do that is starting the conversation with, here's what I think you need to know about this. or what's important to know right now is XYZ. And you may have also noticed number 4 on this slide, which is an interesting one, and people have different opinions about it. And what it says is that you would share all of information about your child's adoption story and birth history by their 12th birthday. So I do want to clarify that this is one approach, and again, not a hard and fast rule. There are definitely emotional and developmental exceptions to this. But I did want to spend a moment explaining, where that comes from, and I actually am going to do that by reading an excerpt of an article that is from Adoptive Families magazine, and I think they do a really great job and make a very eloquent case for why this is the recommendation. So I'm actually going to read that for you because I think they worded it far better than I could. And this is what they had to say. So they said most parents' first inclination is to put it off, telling difficult history, until the child is a teenager. But adolescence, hard enough for most people, is probably one of the worst developmental stages for children to learn about difficult family history. Although teens can understand the information, they're inclined to think if my birth parents were, then that means I must be. Such internalizing can lead to self-destructive thoughts and behaviors. A better time to first share difficult information is around the age of 8. This allows a few years for the child to work through the hard stuff, and for you, as a parent, to emphasize that poor choices made by one generation are not genetically predestined for repetition in the next. So again, I thought that was some really nice language around why that's the recommendation. But again, that's not hard and fast. You kind of know your child and might need to make some changes based on that recommendation. Okay. So as we continue with the 10 truths of telling, I did also want to pull out this first bullet point, it's actually number 6, about allowing your child to express anger about their adoption. And as hard as it is to not take that personally when your child feels angry about it or has really complex feelings about being adopted, it is a bittersweet experience for everyone involved, and it's okay and really a good thing to acknowledge both sides of that. So you can let your child know that it's a bittersweet experience for you as well as an adoptive parent. So maybe some language you would use is, I'm so glad you're a part of our family. I'm so lucky to be your parent. But sometimes I think about your birth family and I feel sad because they weren't able to parent you. Do you ever feel that way? Or what do you think about that? And that's a great way to acknowledge that it's okay to have mixed emotions and create a conversation around it and allow your child to let you know what they think about it by first letting them know and modeling for them what that might look like. And finally, I really like this last one, number 10. Your child probably knows more than you think. Children really are sponges and they pick up on everything. So it's really all the more reason for their parent to start that conversation and give them a safe space to talk about it. It might not be visible, but chances are they're already thinking about it and picking up information. And we certainly want you to be able to help them make sense of that. So this next slide, I'm not going to spend too much time on, to be honest, but it's a table on positive adoption language. And mostly what I want to say about this is just that accepted adoption language changes over time and it's always evolving. So I want to encourage you not to get too stuck on it. Focus on opening up the conversation with your child, not on using the right words or having all the right answers or even having any answers. It's okay to not know and to say that you don't know. And also remember that the language that you prefer to use may not be the same language that your child or other members of the triad that you're interacting with prefer to use. So also leave space for your child to let you know if there's a way they would rather that you word it or put it. And this is another slide I unfortunately don't have as much time as I would like to go through, but I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that siblings also very much factor into the conversation that we're having tonight. We hear about this a lot. Maybe a family is parenting both an adopted child and a biological child, or possibly are parenting multiple adopted children, each of whom have very different adoption stories and backgrounds. And the takeaway I want for tonight to be on this is just a reminder to approach each child differently. This is not a one-size-fits-all conversation. you want to create space for each child to have their own feelings about adoption and acknowledge differences so that they can be spoken about honestly, and to know it's okay if they feel differently from their sibling. So now that we've laid some basic groundwork, I do want to tease out how these conversations might look different based on your child's age. So again, just bear in mind that these are guidelines and different children reach emotional and developmental milestones at different times. So as mentioned before, not hard and fast, but I think this will be a helpful framework to work on as we're talking about this conversation and how to share it with your child. So first we'll start with the littles from birth to age 3. And before I get into it, I just wanted to mention what this picture is. The picture you see here is from our Bagels and Blocks playgroup, which, as I mentioned, is for children ages 0 through 6, and you can see how much fun they have. So this can be a tricky stage for parents, and I know I've definitely had parents ask me this question before of how do I talk about adoption with a child who's not talking yet and who doesn't understand what I'm saying to them yet. And of course, we totally understand the difficulty around that. And it's a good reminder as we're having this conversation that adoption is this very inherent part of your child's identity. So it's something we want to always be spoken about and always just be a part of the conversation going on in your home. And by doing so, you want to let your child know that, again, adoption is an open topic of conversation and something that you'll be planting those seeds to build on later in life as they do start to understand. One of the nice things about this stage, too, is that this is really a great chance for you as parents to practice if you have a child in this age range. I kind of envision in my head it might be kind of a nice thing to just be holding your infant, your baby, and be able to tell them this story and not have to worry about using the right words and saying the right thing because they probably don't understand you yet. But it gives you a chance to gain your own comfort level with it and to start through thinking, as my child gets older, what are the things that I want to share and what felt good about having this conversation and what didn't feel good. And you can really use this time to prepare yourself as time goes on. So it is certainly not a lost age range, and it's not an age range to not take advantage of in terms of starting this conversation. And so for those of you who do have children within this age range but who are on the older side of it and are starting to have those verbal skills, you just want to keep conversation simple yet accurate. So a great way to do this is to be reading adoption books. It's always a great way to bring up conversation with your children. And of course, telling your children their own adoption stories. Your child may not understand all the words or all the implications, but they will understand that the story is about them and that they're loved, and what child doesn't love to hear stories about themselves. So in terms of a conversation you might have at this age, you might say something like, we wanted a child very much, but we couldn't make one ourselves. You were made by another man and another woman, and you grew inside her tummy. Those people are called your birth mother and your birth father. They couldn't take care of a baby, so after you were born, you came to live with us, and we became your mommy and daddy. And you can see that's very simple, concrete language. It's working off of a frame of reference that they already have in terms of family, and they're starting to understand babies are grown in bellies. So this is a good way to start introducing adoption to them, but in a way that is simple and developmentally appropriate. So I'm going to move forward to ages 4 to 6. And I'm going to spend most of our time here because I do believe most of the people tuning into this webinar have children in this age group. Again, you can always check in the chat button and let me know if that's not the case for you. If you want me to spend a little extra time in either of the other age groups, that's fine as well. Okay. So this picture here, this is me. If you don't know what I look like, here it is. And I'm with 2 of our Play Cafe participants. As I mentioned before, Play Cafe is an offshoot of our Bagels and Blocks play group. So this is a quarterly meeting for kids ages 6 through 8. And we engage in age-appropriate adoption conversations, and we do that through fun games and activities. What you see here is a quilt we made describing ourselves and our families and a little bit of our adoption stories. So at this stage, kids are becoming much more aware of being an adoptee, and a lot of this does come down to starting school and their social circles expanding to include new types of people and families and friends. And as they're building these friendships, they are becoming more aware of differences, and this may be especially poignant for conspicuous families out there where you're going to hear your child have more questions about different skin colors and hair types and why don't I look like you or daddy. So those are all things to expect and to look out for. As parents of a child in this age range, I encourage you to look for opportunities to speak about adoption. So it might be school projects, or maybe as you're watching a movie together, pull out some themes related to adoption or family. You want to be positive and realistic and use simple explanations. Kids at this age are very concrete. So if your child asks, "Did I grow in your tummy?" you can respond with, "You grew in your birth mom's tummy, and then you were adopted by me and your mommy or your daddy." And it's okay to start by just answering the question that's asked of you. They may not be able to understand more than that at this point, and sharing too much could easily become confusing. So again, you can start with just answering their question directly, and then you can ask them, do you want to know more, or is that okay for now? And they're at an age where they can start to tell you, I actually, maybe I don't know. I think I need a little more information. I have another question. Or they might just say, okay, and go off and keep playing. So this is the nice thing is you can let them dictate for you a little bit what they need to know and what they don't. But and of course, this conversation will continue as their level of understanding increases. But throughout this, you want to make sure you're always creating an open space for dialogue. And again, continuing to bring up adoption and family often in day-to-day conversations, and always laying that groundwork for your child, knowing if there's more that they need to know or talk about, you're there for that. And so as you're having those conversations, some things that are important to hit on in terms of explaining your child adoption story are how much your child was wanted by your family. These are things kids love to hear about. Or even details like what you felt when you learned about your child or saw their picture for the first time. What were you doing when you got the call from the social worker? I've heard parents tell funny stories about maybe jumping up and down in their pajamas when they got that phone call, and the kids love those stories and they love to tell that to other people, and it makes them feel so special, and they love to have this very special story about themselves. So all that being said, as we mentioned before, 12 is generally the recommendation for when children would have all of their history, but 6 is really the age where it's recommended that kids know the basic story of how they joined their family. So they would know by now something along the lines of, I had a birth mother and a birth family, but they, for this reason, made a plan for me, and now I'm adopted by my forever family. And the reasoning behind that is probably going to be a very simple reason, which we will actually end up talking a little bit more about later. But again, they have the basics of what that means for them. So again, as we're continuing to have these conversations, and as your child is becoming so aware of their similarities and differences, and experiencing so many new things, particularly if you again are in a conspicuous family, this is also a great stage to acknowledge openly the ways that your family might look similar and may look different, and to let your child know that no matter what they look like, they are beautiful and accepted and attractive, and just because they look different doesn't mean that they are less than. And that's something that's really important. I did also want to mention this could be a great age to consider parent coaching, particularly for those of you who have adopted children with maybe a very difficult adoption history and a story you're not quite sure what's the right way to explain this to a child. And so parent coaching, for anyone who's not aware, is a short-term counseling service that we offer. And you work with one of our social workers who are adoption experts surrounding a specific parenting concern. So often it is something related to sharing adoption history, and parents will approach us and say, I just don't know how to talk to my child about XYZ. And our social workers will take into account your child's story and their developmental level, their age, and as well as your parenting style. and help you find a way to have those conversations by offering concrete tools and resources and generally providing support around that. So a very helpful service, and again, especially for those of you who have a really difficult piece of information to share. The final thing I actually want to mention with this age range is just that this is a stage where you may hear your child engage in fantasy thinking about birth family. So a common theme is that birth mom is a princess. And this is totally normal. I just want to validate that. And as we mentioned before, it might be a good place to look for the feeling underneath your child's fantasy and to consider why it might be important for them to imagine birth mom as a princess. Encourage them to tell you the story as they imagine it. It doesn't have to be factual. It doesn't have to be accurate, but it might be really interesting to find out what their understanding is of their story. And certainly putting things into that fantasy context is a common way for children to make sense of things. And adoption is a very difficult thing to make sense of sometimes, and it makes sense that they would put it in this way, that they are more easily able to understand. And this will change as they get older, and they'll integrate more of the facts and understand it in a different kind of way. So I would encourage you not to stifle the fantasy, but to just continue also telling them their adoption stories that happened. So when they're ready, they can integrate that as needed. All right, and I think I am already quickly coming up on my time frame, so I might have to go through these next couple slides a little bit quicker than I intended. So apologies in advance. But I did want to wrap up the ages and stages and then give a couple more closing thoughts before we open up for questions. So the final stage is 7 to 11, and I know for tonight we're really focusing on children up to 8 years old. But as you can imagine, there's certainly overlap between the ages and stages. So, it bared also including maybe slightly older, just for the purposes of tonight's discussion. So at the ages of around 7 to 8 years old, it's very common for children to experience more confusion around their adoption story, and will begin to process and feel that grief and loss related to being adopted in a bigger way. This is also an age where they're becoming better problem solvers, and it might have an interesting effect on their adoption. They might start to wonder, why couldn't the problem that led to my birth parent needing to place me for adoption be solved? So, an example of a question heard at this stage might be, if my birth mom didn't have money to raise me, why didn't you or her family just give it to her? And as a result of this and a lot of confusion around what this really means, you may feel your kids start to pull away or just become more internal and less vocal about their adoption. So as a parent in this stage, it'll definitely be important to remember to start where your child is and to not eclipse their experience. So I like this example. I know of a family that gave their adopted children treasure boxes that were full of photos and mementos related to each child's adoption and infancy. And it was something that was kept in each child's room. And they were able to look at it whenever they wanted and rifle through all these, treasures of their adoption and their story as a family. And I thought that was a great example of a way that the parents created a context around the adoption, and they provided the materials. They were able to choose, kind of the pieces they wanted to share with their child at that stage in their life. But the child also had the ability and the privacy to access it when they needed to. And if they wanted to open it up to a larger conversation, they could. But also, if they just wanted to kind of sit in their room alone and look through it and think about it, they had the space to do that. And that was a really nice way to meet that child's need exactly where they were. So talking about adoption during this stage, again, that you might find that conversation diminish, which can be difficult. But as a parent, you want to make yourself available and let your child know you're available. Let them know that you really do want to help them find answers and encourage them to ask you questions. You'd want to continue to acknowledge the bittersweet nature of adoption. And don't be afraid to let your child know that there are things that you still wonder about or things that you might have a hard time understanding. And they're old enough that you can start to share a little bit more openly with them and, again, model for them what those conversations might look like and open it up to them. Do you agree? Do you think about this in a way that's going to feel relevant and appropriate for them? So this is a time, especially towards the end of this age range, where peer support is going to become so much more important. So you might want to consider building additional supports for your child outside of just your immediate family. And some ways you can do that are through culture camps or peer support groups. Here at Spence-Chapin, we have a mentorship program. It's for adopted children in 6th through 12th grade, so towards the high end of this age range we're looking at right now. But it allows them to connect with other adopted peers as well as adopted adult role models. We also have the Lifebook Workshop, which is what's pictured here on this slide. And that is where children who are in this age range of early school-age children are able to come and create an album of their life story, their adoption story, of their family. They do this with support from their parents and sometimes from their siblings, and we also have our staff members available to help them process and plan out what this is going to look like for them. It's a really fun day. As you can see here, this is one of our participants very proudly showing off his album that he made with his mom, and he did a beautiful job. Okay, so a couple things, really important things to not do when we're having these conversations. The first is trying to fix the pain of adoption. That's something to not do. But it's so easy to want to do this. As a parent, it's difficult to see children struggling or hurting. But it's important, as we've been mentioning, to acknowledge all of the feelings that come along with adoption, both those that are good and those that are more difficult, and to be able to manage them and sit with them together. Okay, the next is don't create an emotional space where your child has to take care of you. So simply put, this is really to say that it's not about you when you're having these conversations. And if you're feeling emotional, your child may get the sense that they're only going to be upsetting you if the conversation continues, and they may worry about hurting your feelings, and that's not going to be a good place for that conversation to keep going. So while you want to be honest about your feelings, you need to also be strong enough to lead the conversation. In the mentorship program, quite a few of our adopted middle and high schoolers have talked about this, and will say when I speak with it's usually my mom, about adoption, she gets very tearful, and in a good way, happy tears, as she's reflecting on how happy she is that they're a family. But for that child, it makes them feel like they can't continue with that conversation. They're worrying that they hurt mom's feelings. Or sometimes they are just kind of, to be honest, just kind of annoyed and just feeling like I need this to be about me right now, and I need to be the one to be emotional. And I as we kind of said here, like, I don't want to take care of you. I want you to take care of me. And that can be frustrating for them. So even if you're emotional, not necessarily in a negative way, what your kid is really needing from you in that moment is to be that supportive but neutral presence. And to really let them lead that conversation and identify the feelings that are associated with it. The third that we have on here is to not impose values on the information that's shared. So this can be done verbally or non-verbally, so very important to be aware of. When you place your own opinions or values on your child's story, you may be sending negative messages, and that's going to shut down the conversation or make your child feel badly about themselves. So an example might be if your child has a birth parent who's incarcerated, and maybe they hear you say at some point, people who are in jail are blah, blah, blah. Now they're going to wonder, well, if people who are in jail, according to my mom, are this, and my parent is that, does that make me that? Am I also bad? Am I also, somehow not as important as those who are not in jail? And you can imagine how very quickly that would shut down any further conversation, and that child is going to worry that you might not fully accept their birth family, and by extension, maybe not fully accept them. And the last point on here is to not minimize the importance of any known facts. So this really means what's going to be important is to ask rather than assume what's meaningful for your child. And also listen for whatever information they're holding on to. Might surprise you. I actually just recently heard, I think, a really fascinating story about an adoptive mother, and she took her daughter to the orphanage where her daughter lived before she was adopted. And the daughter was bouncing around all around the waiting room, sitting in every single seat, and her mother was feeling very frustrated I think her mother was hoping she would, maybe want to tour the facility or speak to the staff. And in her mother's eyes, her daughter didn't seem to really care, and wasn't taking it seriously. But later that evening, as they were kind of unwinding from the day, the daughter revealed to her mother that the reason she sat in every seat was because she wanted to be sure that she sat in the same seat that her birth mother did. And it was such a small detail, just sitting in the same seat as her birth mother sat in, but it was so much more important to her than what her mother would have expected or anticipated. Luckily she did create a conversation around that and was able to find out. But the opposite could have been if she hadn't done that. She might have just assumed her daughter didn't care, when clearly she was really thinking about it and wanting to connect with her birth mom. So you want to make sure you let your child decide what is important when it comes to their adoption story. And again, keep that conversation going. So really our last slide is one I'm pretty excited about, because I wish every presentation ended like this, of just really coming back and answering the two central questions that we promised we would answer as we were advertising for this webinar. And that is, how much does my child really need to know, and how do I share it with them? So of course, we've been talking about this all along this evening already, but I wanted to really just pull it all together and summarize, to make it as clear and as easy as possible. So to answer this first question, how much does my child really need to know? Of course, we don't have a single answer for every child. It's true for everyone. You need to consider your child's unique personality, their age, their development, and that'll help kind of inform that. And the general suggestions that we spoke about were that your child would know the basics of their adoption story by age 6 and everything by age 12. And I think, to be honest, this is honestly how I would answer this question in a nutshell. How much does my child really need to know? The answer is everything. They should know everything about their adoption. But it just will be up to you and the professionals in your life and the supports in your life to help you decide exactly how that gets rolled out. So the way you would do that is to start with concrete and simple facts, planting those seeds to build on over time. So how do you share this with them? As we mentioned, you create opportunities for discussion. And even when your child doesn't share, you can be the one to initiate those conversations and just share what you're thinking and feeling. You can do that by using tools such as books and movies. So many books and movies have adoption themes, or at least family themes, that you can draw from. And of course, there's more formal supports like parenting groups, parent coaching, workshops, all things we talked about tonight. And also, finally, to tell your child their story often and accurately. And the final sentence I have on here is just basically drawing attention to the fact that while we always encourage you to plan and prepare for these conversations, always leave room for your child to tell you what their understanding is, what they feel about adoption, and where they need your support. There should be just as much, if not more, listening going on than speaking. This is a conversation. It's a give and take. And you need to allow your child that space to be a really vital and important member of these conversations. So I do want to thank everyone for joining. And I just want to remind that we have these great post-placement services, as we've mentioned, counseling, parent coaching, lifebook workshop, adoptive family play groups, all great things to take advantage of. And if you're interested, please, feel free to reach out. I'd love to tell you more. And before we finally break to our questions, I did also want to mention to everyone who's on the webinar right now that we will be sending out a survey to everyone who participated tonight. And I would ask you to take a moment to respond. It'll be showing up in your email within the week. And this will really help us understand what future events, what webinars you're wanting to see us put in place. I think this is a really important topic, and I hope we can continue to build on it. But as I mentioned before, it'll be really important to also get your feedback so we can make sure it's as relevant as possible for you. All right. So all that being said, thank you again for joining. I'm sorry I had to go through things rather quickly, but I hope it was still advantageous for everyone. And in our last, I believe we have about 20 minutes is the time that I have. I'm just going to ask if anyone has any questions. Feel free to type that into the chat section. I'll be happy to help. So ask away. Okay. So, first question is, my daughter doesn't talk about adoption and doesn't seem to care. How do I talk to her about it? Okay, that's great. That's a great question and totally normal. Um, Everyone feels differently about adoption, and your daughter might always feel this way. It might change over time. And, again, both of those are totally acceptable. The important thing is to let her know that the door is always open for these conversations. So we mentioned some of those subtle conversation starters, like noting out loud themes that you see in movies related to adoption and family. To be honest, when you really start thinking about it, a lot more movies have themes like that than we even realize. One of my favorite examples is even the Harry Potter series. Harry Potter is raised by his aunt and uncle. He's not raised by his mother and father. So although it's not a great situation for him, even so, you could say, what do you think about that? Do you wish they had portrayed this any differently? Or has it ever occurred to you that Harry Potter was kind of an adopted person too? So, again, these are just ways that you can bring kind of these popular culture themes out in a way that's relevant to family and adoption. And you could also try the treasure box idea that I mentioned before, that if your daughter does ever find herself thinking about it more, she has a private way to do that. And just, keep planting seeds and don't be discouraged if she doesn't seem interested. You just want to make sure you let her know that door is always open. I have another question. My daughter has birth siblings that her birth mom is parenting. How do I help her understand? All right. So sorry, I'm navigating the technology still. All right. So I'm sorry. So this is a difficult one. Comes up a lot. It's especially difficult if the birth siblings are close in age to your child, or if your child is was the only one placed for adoption in the birth family. So I'd say the main thing is to not try and downplay it, not try to make it go away. Your daughter may have some very complicated feelings about this that you want to normalize and validate. You could say something like, some kids feel angry or confused or sad or hurt. Do you feel like any of those things? It's a great way to validate what she might feel, but also give her some possible language. And the important thing is not to assume anything, let her dictate how she feels. And you may find it's a big deal for her or not a big deal at all. But you want to give her what facts you have and create that open space to discuss it together. Okay. Hmm. So one of the other questions I see is, what if I try to talk to my child and he or she gets upset or starts feeling sad that their birth mom didn't want them? That's a really good question and very common. I think the best thing you can do is just kind of validate and maybe say it out loud, as I see you look like maybe you're feeling kind of upset. And can you tell me a little bit more about what's going on for you right now? It if they're old enough, if they're at an age when they might be able to start verbalizing a little bit what that means. Um, if they're a little younger or maybe struggling to find the words, I think that's a good place for you to also acknowledge that sometimes you feel sad about it or have mixed feelings about it. I know we talked tonight about modeling, and I think that would be a good way to do it, is maybe building on that conversation of, I see you seem like you're feeling kind of sad, and you know what, sometimes I feel sad too, and I think about this and I wonder about this, and what pieces of this make you feel sad or upset. You could also say, would it be better if maybe we talked about this later tonight, or would you rather do something else first and we can revisit this? Because it could always be that they just need to have that conversation in smaller dosages. Okay, we've read that we should limit how much information we share with strangers since it's our son's story. Initially, when he's young, how should we make the decision of how much to share? So I'm assuming that means before he has the opportunity to dictate how much or how little he would want you to share. Hmm. So, I would say it's twofold. Some of this will come down to your personal preference and your personal comfort level. I know some families are really excited to share as much as possible, and some hold that a little bit more closely to them. But I think another way to look at it is the motivation of the person who's asking you. Um, it could be that you're talking to someone who seems like they're really interested in adoption and want to know more about it. Maybe you're considering adoption themselves, in which case you might want to spend a little more time with them and explain to them what this means and what the process was like. But if it's just someone kind of trying to divulge their own curiosity, or just ask an intrusive question, um, then honestly, that's probably someone that I would recommend not going into details with. Certainly you can be choosy about who has the right to know your story and who doesn't. So that's probably where I would start with that. I would think it's going to be a good idea for you to be able to show your son and model for him what that looks like. So that might mean finding opportunities to speak to trusted friends or family members a little bit more about adoption so that he gets older, he has a frame of reference for what that conversation looks like. And that's going to help him understand whether that's something he would want you to continue as he gets older, and when and if he's ready to have that conversation with others himself, he still has some of that language. These are really excellent questions, and I wish I had time to answer every single one of them. Okay, how important is the life book? Is there a specific age when the book should be made and is more meaningful? So our life book workshop is from ages 6 and up, and really from 6 through 12, I should say, with the understanding that 6 years old is a bit on the young side. We really most recommend it for children 8 through 12, who are on the older end of that spectrum. Um, and again, it's one of those things that it could be that you have a particularly mature 7-year-old who's totally ready for it. But in general, we found that the kids who are 8 to 12 years old have a deeper level of understanding of their story and might just have more content to add to it and more context. So we found that that's a particularly meaningful age and an age when they're really ready to start taking control of their adoption story and putting it in their own words, whereas younger than that might still be borrowing a lot of the language that they had from their parents. And Lifebook is a great tool to kind of really start to take ownership of that for themselves. So I'd say meaningful across all ages, but I would say if they're in that older school age group, really tend to get the most out of it, is what we've found. Actually, December 15th is our next life book. And with that, we're opening up not only to those who have never made a life book before, but also to families who would like to add on to their existing life books. So this is also a great place for kids who have a life book, maybe created one at a younger age, or their parents created one for them, but now are ready to come back and add on, or put their own spin on the life book. So you can always keep that on your calendar. December 15th would be a great opportunity to get started on the life book journey. That's a really good question. How do we share adoption story in a closed adoption when we don't know anything about birth parents? So, funny enough, this actually makes me think of Lifebook too. We have a page of the Lifebook that's specific to birth families. And with that, we ask our kids to, if they know anything, of course, they can put down what they know or put down pictures. But many of our kids who participate don't know anything, in which case we will tell them, this is a page for you. You can draw a big question mark on it. You can write down what questions you have or what you imagine, what you think to be true. It's not a place where it needs to be factual. It really is just about capturing your own understanding. And I think that's something you could bring home is talking to your kids about, what do you imagine when you think of birth mom and birth dad? What do you think is true? Or you can speculate out loud something like, you have such beautiful blonde hair. I wonder if your birth mom had blonde hair like that, or your birth father. I wonder if you get your art skills from your birth family. And that might be a good way to keep them as part of the conversation and accept them as a part of your family story, even though you don't know too much about them. Speculating together can be just as important for your child if they don't know or if you don't know anything about their parents. Sorry. Let's see. All right, so this is actually a response to the question I got before about, um, kind of drawing that very difficult line between letting your child lead that conversation about how much they want to share about parents and when they're young, how much jumping in should you be doing. So I got some clarification on that. So this is more specific to people that this family doesn't know who would be genuinely curious. It says here, my instinct is to use the opportunity to train people in adoption, but I do realize it's not my story. I think that's wise, to be honest. Like you said, to use that opportunity to teach and to train. Again, your child is picking up on everything and seeing how you would have a conversation like that. So they're going to be better able to make that decision when they're older. But I know it is very difficult, especially because people seem to not have much of a filter when it comes to adoption, especially if it's a conspicuous family. They seem to feel very free to openly comment on your family or ask intrusive questions. It's something we talk about in mentorship a lot. Something that we have used, which is actually a curriculum for children, but I think can be just as applicable for families, is the Wise Up curriculum, WISE. And it's a curriculum for children who are adopted. There's a version for those adopted from foster care versus private or international adoption. And it goes through all the potential reactions and responses that you could give to questions about adoption. And it's everything from, I can just walk away and not answer to maybe I want to educate or maybe I want to share something about myself and helping you identify what your options are. I think it's something that's helpful as a parent to review, but also a helpful tool to share with your child as he or she gets older. Okay. Okay. So we are a gay couple. So in our case, there's no mom at home, and the questions are coming up much earlier than usual. He's 4. Can you tell us more about how to introduce the adoption concept to him? I think I would start with just kind of acknowledging the many different kinds of families there are, and there's certainly a lot of books that introduce that about the different kinds of families and different colors and dynamics and makeups of families. And that might be a nice place to start, acknowledging that, while your friend so and so has a mommy and a daddy or 2 mommies, you have 2 daddies. Um, and just, starting from there about the different kinds of families. And our family is extra special because not only do you have 2 daddies, but we also, are an adoptive family. And that means that you grew in another woman's tummy and then we adopted you, and you're now part of our forever family. So as you mentioned, I mean, he is obviously noticing, perhaps even earlier than some other children, and these questions are starting to come up, and so he's already opening those doors to answer those questions, and I think that's how I would approach it, is starting from just the many different ways a family can be comprised and can come together, and building on it from there. Okay. There's so many questions here, and I apologize. I'm having trouble keeping up with all of them. I know some people are eager for theirs to be answered. I think we'll definitely have to do a round 2 of this. All right. My husband and I are in contact with birth mom and have visits twice a year. We visit the birth mother, but she's only identified by name and as a friend. When is a good time to identify her true identity as a birth mother? Her adopted daughter is 3.5. I would start soon. I think she's at a really good age for that, where she's going to start to understand. And I think going too much beyond that could start to enter confusing territory. So, I mean, again, I think that's a good place to start with just an adoption concept in general, whether it's from a book or a movie, kind of start explaining what adoption is and who a birth mom is. And then you can say, like the character in this book or in this movie, you're also adopted and you have a birth mom and her name is such and such. And just remind your child that we have so much fun with her and we love seeing her, and it's so special for her that she gets to still have a relationship with you, and you grew in her tummy, but we are your mommy and daddy. and are happy to have this ongoing relationship with her. So I would be starting up that conversation soon. Let's see if I missed anything else. So many good questions, guys. Making sure I hit all of them. Okay. So someone had asked if the slides will be made available or shared via email. Um, it will probably be a combination of both. This is being recorded, so we will be able to share this at a later date. And I'm actually going to have to work with our outreach department, to be honest, to find out exactly what that'll look like. Ideally, we'd love to have this be posted to social media accounts or other people to access later, but it'll definitely be available at the very least as a link to be seen later, and we can include the slides with that. So absolutely, you'll be able to access it. And I know there are some who couldn't join us tonight who will definitely be sending this to them as well. Okay. All right, Amelia, hopefully that answered your question too. We'll definitely be available to listen to and read again. Oh, this is a really good one. Thank you for asking this. So when you say your child should know everything by 12, what about things like drug problems? So the simple answer is yes, but again, in a context that makes sense for a 12-year-old. So I'm just picking that out since you mentioned everything by 12, but understand we would be talking about initiating that conversation earlier. One of the advantageous things that's specific to issues related to drug and alcohol abuse is that this is something that's going to be coming up in school. And actually, they're going to be learning about peer pressure and saying no to drugs. So this is maybe a good place where if you know that these conversations are happening, you can pick up on them at home and say, I know you had your drug and alcohol assembly at school today, and kind of use that as a door to revisit what they know about birth mom. I know a lot of times adoptive families will, up until a certain point, stage it as your birth mom was maybe ill or unable to take care of you, and kind of leave it at that until their child is a little older and has more of a context for what it means to struggle with drug and alcohol addiction. And so I think that's a great example of a good way to be planting the seed all along of there was a reason, an illness, an inability. And then again, from there, you can maybe pick up with this thing I know you learned about in school today, and I know you're learning about. We've spoken before that your birth mom was ill, or whatever the language is that you've used. And, I wanted to revisit that with you. And as you're learning about what this means, let you know that that's something that your birth mom struggled with, and that she was unable to stop, and it, inhibited her ability to take care of you and to parent you. And that was the reason why she made this plan, and we became your adoptive family. And as your child's learning more about it, they might have more of an understanding and can ask these great questions. And if you don't know what's going on for birth mom right now, you can always say exactly that. We don't know if she's better. We don't know where she is, but we certainly hope that she is and hope she's getting the help and treatment that she needs. Again, I think that's one of the nice things is that we'll kind of already start to be introduced to their world, and it's something you can build on if you've already laid that groundwork. Ooh. Movies or books recommended for age 5? Good question. Well, I'm always partial to to cartoons and Disney movies myself, which I know not everyone feels the same way about. But I do think there's some really interesting themes you can pull out of animated movies. I think about a movie like Finding Nemo, where a father and son are separated, and that might be an interesting place to talk about what it means when families aren't together, and what would have happened if Nemo and his father couldn't have found each other and didn't reconnect, or Nemo's father couldn't be a parent anymore. And there's certainly grief and loss in that story as Nemo, the main character's mother, dies, as actually a pretty common theme. and a lot of animated movies. And again, this is all a great place to talk about, like, wow, I was really sad when I saw that happened. And what did you think about that? So these are probably movies you're already kind of going to see and watching at home, and just kind of keep an eye out for those themes that come up. And as I mentioned, once you're tuned to it, it comes up even more than you would expect. Let's see. My 5-year-old is obsessed with babies and in bellies. She loves looking at moms and pointing them at me. And she always plays with a doll in her belly. Is this okay? She does know her story, and she does ask a lot, even more than my other adopted daughter, who's 8, which, as you say, is more internal. Yeah, absolutely. Totally normal, totally okay. To me, that speaks to a very normal stage of development for a 5-year-old, of just being really interested in babies and bellies, like you said. Wouldn't even necessarily venture to say that that's an adoption specific thing. That sounds very age appropriate in general. Um, and it sounds like very much the imaginative play that you would expect at that stage. And a lot of kids that age play house and just want to start thinking about what it means to be a mommy. And definitely find that to be totally normal. It might be a great opportunity to bring up conversation to remind her that she was born in another woman's belly. As you're listening and watching her play, you might see adoption kind of themes coming out, and again, might be a great jump off for discussion. But definitely totally normal to be expected, and also very cute. Okay, so we're actually at 7 o'clock, which I'm very sad about because there's still plenty more questions, and they're really great. So I will just start wrapping things up. And I do just want to say you can always feel free to call or email me if you have any further questions, or there's something I didn't get to that you really want me to. Again, we will be sending out a survey, so it sounds like there's a lot more to talk about. So please capture that on your survey if you are able to take that moment and fill it out, because we would love to keep this going. It's been really helpful for me, and I hope helpful for you as well. So, all right. So, like I said, I'm going to wrap this up. I will quickly put back up on the screen our number and phone number, our phone number and email, so you can always reach out if you have any further questions. And again, my name is Katie Rogala, and I'm happy to connect with you whenever needed. So, thank you again for joining us. I hope this was time well spent for you, and really appreciate your feedback and your amazing questions. And with that, I encourage you to reach out if you need anything else. And I hope we will see you at an event soon, or hear from you soon. Thank you all so much for participating. We really appreciate it. Okay, bye-bye.